Alright, what up world? This is Courage to Change. I'm Brian Wright. I've been blessed today to have James Cowan interviewing today. And he's a special guy that I met in my road to recovery that I like to refer to him as the voice in this deal. And thank you for joining me.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. Busy guy. This guy, man, took like how long?
Several probably at least a month since we've been talking about getting together to do this.
Yeah.
So it's been a journey.
Yeah, I'm excited though. So tell us a little bit about your story.
All right. I guess do we want to start in the beginning with family life or?
Sure.
Well, I grew up very normal. I have 4 siblings. It's actually, there are 3 siblings. I'm the fourth one. I have 2 sisters, 1 brother. We grew up in a very normal lifestyle, I like to say. I say that just kind of jokingly. It was not the best of homes, but my parents did the best they could. I was involved with state custody from in and out since I was born, and then it's been, I don't regret anything. I'm not ashamed of anything in my past. It was actually, the state, being in state custody, they did for me a lot more than what my parents could do for me. So, I was just blessed to, be on the good side of those. You hear a lot of stories about bad foster homes or bad places. State custody actually did the best they could, placed me in the best areas. I just was not the best of kids.
Right.
Moving right into recovery, I took my very first, drink very young. To me, I thought, alcohol was like a soda thing. It was that young. It was I remember it very vividly, actually. It was like, I was 6 years old, and my dad got back from the bar, and he was like, finish these, beers before your mom gets home. Me, I'm like 6 years old. I don't know what beer is. To me, I thought it was type of like soda. So it was like, I take a drink, and nothing magical happened. It wasn't like I was hooked or anything. What did happen was I did like the taste of beer. I was never big into too many sweet things. So I did like it. Didn't feel any effect of alcohol. I drank, polished off that rest of that little 12 pack, and I fell asleep.
Right.
That was the magic of that event. Later on, I think I do remember the first time I ever felt the effects of alcohol. I was drinking, with some older members of my family. I just thought it was the normal thing to do. I was 8 years old. I remember my first drunk was also my first blackout. I remember coming to and looking over, and I seen my cousin. He had threw up beanie weenies. Look across the street, my brother was he'd get picked up by the cops. And so, I grabbed my cousin and I start jerking him around, get up, cops, and we go running in the house, it was nothing too exciting. Actually, it was a very, very comical time. And then, I think not too long after that, I found drugs. I found marijuana was my first one that I found, and I come across that. It was very prevalent in my family and stuff. It was another normal thing that we did.
Right.
And so I remember I stole a joint from one of my uncles, and I put it in the cellophane, buried it in the yard. Now this is another comical thing. So I'm probably a little latter half of my eight-year-old year. So I go out there, I get a lighter, and I undo my little joint that I stole, and so I thought that when you're smoking, the cherry gets hot. This is my eye observation. So I pull it out and I light it, and I start blowing into the joint. Instead of
right.
inhaling, I thought that's how you smoke because the cherry got hot and everything.
Right.
So I immediately knew this was wrong because I wasn't I could tell that by observing people that do smoke, they were feeling something, and I obviously was doing it wrong. So I put it out. I go grab my cousin. I'm like, hey, look, you got to teach me how to smoke. And then, he taught me how to smoke, and then it was just I took off from there. It was always I became one of the guys. I was hanging with my aunts, hanging with my cousins. That's what we did. Is we partied.
Right.
We got lifted. it was the normal thing to do. Like, you know, I thought I like had passed in from like childhood into being part of the family.
Manhood.
Like,
yeah.
Like it was like the graduating. Like if you learned these things, like you became part of. So
right.
That's what, like, you know, and that's the way I felt about it. And
so at what point did it become a problem for you?
I think when it started to consume my life was probably not too short after that. Some events happened. I went into state custody, and like, you know, I get into a foster home, and I think I was probably about 12 years old. Like, you know, and then I started to seek out those people to get that feeling again. Like, you know, I think it was right out the gate, like 11 years old, it started to become a problem. And like why I say it became a problem is because it started to affect life. Like it became the sole purpose. Like, you know, like I got to a foster home, and it was like that movie 21 Jump Street where
right.
you know, Ice Cube saying like, you know, infiltrate the, you know, dealer, find the supplier. That's exactly was my main goal. Like I got to the foster home, I had to find a dealer, get a supplier. Like it was just like that. And what had happened is like, you know, I do the drugs, and I wasn't a terrible kid, but like I'd always get caught doing drugs. Like I'd always get caught smoking weed, and then I became the worst kid ever.
Right.
Like, you know, and so I, you know, moved to several foster homes. I think when I first experienced like the people telling me I had a problem, like that really affected me. They probably said it a long time ago, but I don't remember. But the one that affected me the most is I ran away like 15 going into 16, and I, you know, go find my parents or find my mom in the city and stuff, and I'm staying with them as a runaway from state custody, and like, you know, I'm drinking every day, and I'm not really doing anything productive. Like like my brother, he looked at me, like, you know, and he said, like, you know, he called me a smuck, and it really affected me. And like, you know, they talk about these things that I would do when I was drinking, like you know, like just being the slosh, like, you know,
right.
pissing on yourself, or like, you know, like they would say these things that I wouldn't have no recollection of
right.
happening. Like, I mean, I'd wake up and piss, so I knew that happened. But they'd say, like, you know, you said this, or, you know, or I'd fight everybody that, like, you know, looked at me differently, like, you know, like
right.
that I thought looked at me differently, like I'd act very impulsive, and like, you know, I think that's when I recognized, you know, that it was a problem. I wasn't going to school. I wasn't doing anything productive. Like, you know, my soul, everything in my being was just to, you know, get loaded, to get lifted, you know, to drink. Like, you know, of course I was doing other substances along the time. Like, you know, I think that was right around the time I started huffing, like, you know, like just different types of gases, like you know, butane, even gasoline. Like it was a bad time. I dabbled into like a little cocaine, and then
right.
like, you know, I knew a lot of people doing meth at the time, and I really, like, I tried to stay away from that as long as I could. But there's this there's a saying that expresses it all. Like, you hang around in a barber shop, you're eventually going to get a haircut.
Right.
That's what happened. I remember telling myself very, very clear that I would never smoke meth, and like, you know, and then 3 months later I was smoking meth, and like, you know, it was like I think I said that about a lot.
Right.
And that usually happens. And I did that for many of years, like, you know, in and out of state custody. I went back, you know, I get caught by the police, and then, like, you know, they take me back to state custody. And then I do the same thing I always do. Like, I get to a good foster home, good people, good, you know, family surrounding, go to a great school, like, you know, and then I do the same thing. I'd find the dealer, you know, get the supplier, and then, like, you know, I'd just keep doing what I was doing. And they'd eventually find out, and I'd have to move to placement. I think it all changed when I finally, you know, turned 18. Like, you know, I was a runaway when I turned 18. I was staying with some friends out in the country in Oklahoma here, and they weren't into like the types of drugs I was doing, and they didn't use as hard as I did. But like, you know, I tried my best to, like, you know, moderate or keep control. But it just seemed like, you know, I had to get to a certain point, or like, you know, I didn't have no control over it. I was unaware that I didn't have no control over it, and I'd always, you know, find the blackout and do something, you know, something crazy. Well, something crazy happened out there, like, you know, and then like I had no recollection of it, and they didn't want to, like, you know, express what had happened. It wasn't nothing criminally offensive or anything like that. I know that, like, you know, but they were like, look, like, you know, we can't have that around here, like, you know, like, you know, it was not that they can't, like, they were just like, look,
you got to go.
You got to go. Like, you done stayed, you're welcome here.
Yeah.
And it was like, they asked me if I had anywhere to go, and then I said like, yeah, family in the city. And then so like, I made my journey back to the city, and I remember as soon as I got here to the city, like, I found my parents, like, my mom and my grandma and stuff, and like they're all staying together. So I moved in with them. Like, of course I didn't have shit. I had a bag of clothes. Like,
right. I remember that.
And so like I'm here in the city, and I was just like, let's go say hi to all the friends, and and I went and seen. They've been doing the same thing since they were, wee bitty too. Like, we were all drinking and using. I just picked up where I left off. Like, it was like I never stopped. Or like,
So did you ever end up? Did your alcoholism or drug abuse ever lead to jail time?
It eventually did. A few years passed. Like, nothing happened, and then so I was staying with some friends. Like, I finally moved away from the families, and I was staying with some friends, and it seems to be a common theme. So I'm like drinking at a bar, like, and at first I was drinking at the house. Then I went to the bar, and I thought it would be a good idea. At this point, I knew that hard liquor was very bad for me because I black out every time.
Right.
And, like, for some reason, like, I was like, this time I thought it was going to be different. I was going to celebrate because I was going to move out of my friend's house into my own place that same week. And I thought it was a good time to celebrate, and I started in on some Jack and Coke, and eventually I drank enough of those that I blacked out. Like, and I remember leaving the bar, and then I remember like I was swaying really hard, so I decided to take a neighborhood route and instead of walk down the main street. And so it was like, I head off towards the neighborhood, and I remember making it across the street from the bar, and then I start blacking in and out, and it's like late January, so it's still cold outside. And to me, I think I climbed in this truck because I was cold. Like, I do remember coming to inside of a truck, and I was like, what the hell am I doing in the truck? I went to slide out the truck, and my hand struck the keys, and it was like my body was set to autopilot. Like, I was aware for a second. Keys went right into the ignition. I started the truck up, and then I stole the truck. And
right.
My friends said, like, they had seen me driving by their house doing about 100 through some neighborhoods. I remember at one point in time I was driving and looking at the floorboard, and then I remember coming up to an intersection and seeing a car stop ahead of me and locking up, and I hit them probably doing about 60. And then I get out the truck, of course, making sure everyone's all right. And when they were assessing the damage of both the vehicles, everyone was all right. When they were assessing the vehicles, like, I attempted to run. And then my adrenaline wore off, drunk came back, and I couldn't get off the ground. And at which point, like, so many minutes later, a cop showed up, and I was arrested for, the DUI and all that, and all the associated charges. So I spent roughly about 15 days in the county jail for that. And that was a defining moment. Like, I immediately ran out of options, and I had no which way to go. And I don't know how it happened. By chance, somebody had told me about recovery. Like, by that point, like, I had my job, like, they talked about this thing called sober living. They had given, like, they made it sound so good that I asked for the number. That's it. And I never thought I'd ever, use that number. And then 3 months later, like, that car accident, DUI thing happened, and I wound up, nobody wanted me to stay with them. Nobody, like, I ran out of options. There was nothing else I could do. And,
we burned bridges.
I done exhausted all the family, the friends, that I was staying with at the time were like, hey, look, we got kids, and, we can't really have you staying here. And, like, I was facing 7 years in prison. They were trying to make me do the full extent. It was a bad deal. Like, and so I did what I did. I was too scared to go to prison. I was too scared to be homeless. So I called the sober living house, and man, I really lucked out, man. I ran into, like, I felt like exactly where I needed to be. Like,
that's good.
I didn't know shit. I didn't know shit about anything, any 12-step program, any type of recovery. I didn't even, to me, I believed to my heart and soul that there was no way I could live in the world without doing drugs or alcohol.
Right.
There was no fun. There was no reason to live life. Like, it was, that's where I was at. I was at the jumping off place. I either had to you know, going to the bitter end, running from everything responsibility-wise, running from like, you know, traffic charges, drug charges, or like I had to like, you know, off myself, which I was too scared to do that. And luckily there was another route. There was another route, and it was getting involved with this 12-step recovery program. I fell in.
How many years sober are you?
As of now, I'm a little over 3 years sober.
That's awesome.
So this all acquired, like, you know, I acquired everything happened in 2015, like, you know, and
who are some of the people along the way that like mentored you or inspired you or just encouraged you?
Okay, yeah, that one, starting out the gate, when I moved into the sober living house, I have to give it up to the guy that was running that sober living house. My sober living manager, man, the dude was a character. He was a little burned up. He has a funny voice. He just has like he's very animated. He's just he was a great guy, because what he did with me is he like took me in and he kind of like let me follow him around until, like, you know, I started walking, like, you know, and like what he did is he showed me all about, like, you know, these. He didn't tell me anything. He was like, look, you're coming with me. And he took me to these meetings where these guys like were meeting up, and then they would talk about these horrible, like, you know, not these horrible things, but like horrible things that they were horrible. Like, you know, crap that you would just be like, why are you laughing about? Right. They were laughing about. And like, you know, he took me to my very first meeting, and like, you know, and what is now, like, you know, my one commitment a week I take out to go to this meeting. And man, it's just full of great guys. It's an all guys meeting, like, you know, and what they were talking about that day was, like, you know, they were talking about experiences that they had that were just like mine, and sometimes far worse than mine, and they were laughing about it. Right. And they were like, I can genuinely tell these guys were free from the burdens of, like, you know, their past. They had just a gleam in their eye, like, you know, there was just like, you know, and I wanted that. Right. Like, you know, and like, I remember leaving that meeting, they asked me, what did I think of it? Like, you know, I just felt like, I told them, I was like, you know, I felt like it's a push in the right direction. Like, you know, so I stuck around. And then there was, like, not too long after that, a few weeks later, like, so, like, of course, I still do shit about this 12-step recovery, this program, like, you know,
what was the sober living house?
It was called the Better Days House.
Okay, Better
like,
Days,
you know,
okay.
Like, I still rap it, Better Days.
Yeah.
So there's other, like, sober living houses, like, I turned it into a thing, like, you know, like, I'd ask, you know, whose sober living house you're in, and then I'd bang on it, like, Better Days. Fortunately,
awesome.
Like, the meeting that we used to hold at that house is still going. We had to move it from the house itself to a actual clubhouse. Okay. Like, you know, but like they sold the house, like, you know, it was a great house. It was, like, you know, and then I guess, like, you know, one of the other guys that was like a big mentor is there was another guy in the house, like, you know, all the guys talked him up, like, you know, he's a spiritual guru, and, like, you know, they really like talked this guy up. So in my head, I remember making a conscious decision. I was like, if I had any questions about this 12-step program, I'm going to ask this guy. And so I cornered him in the kitchen, and so, like, I asked him, I was like, so what's this 12 stuff all about? And he was like, you really want to know? And I was like, yeah. And then he was, and so, like, I did that, and I started following some of the other suggestions. They asked of me, they were like, you know, get a mentor, like, you know, look that they, like, you know, and and I remember I used to call my mentor, like, you know, and I'd be like, yo, I'm going to jail, my life's going to shit, like, you know, they want me to pay all these things, and, like, you know, and he'd do the same thing. He'd be like, so how's your book work coming? Like, you know, how's the step work coming? And I'm all like, what does that have to do with anything? Right. Like, you know, like, man, it's the magic of the 12-step program. I don't know how, like, working the 12-step program, like, you know, and just focusing on that, and then doing just like what was asked of me, man, and like all that shit's behind me now. Like, next year I'll get off of the probation. It'll be the last of the deferred sentencing. Instead of 7 years in prison, they gave me 4 years deferred, 2 years supervised, 2 years on. That's cool. I finished all the little requirements they asked of me, like, you know, and I was like, all the money, it was when I stole the truck and wrecked the truck, and all the associated costs. It came out to instant 15 grand in debt. Like, and I paid that off in roughly about 16 months on a minimum wage job. Like, it was not, I never really addressed how much of my using, was associated with my financial life. Like, until I started to look at that, and I didn't look at it first. I noticed it first. Like, I was like, I got so much money.
Right.
It was definitely a drawing there. But like one payment at a time, and I chipped away at a 15 grand debt and paid it off in 16 months. It was just another one of the gifts of the program.
That's awesome.
And then there's so much that I've gained from doing the 12-step program. It was not only financial security, it's like emotional stability, tools to use in life, and we'll see some of them at my position, at my current job. I'm a data management specialist I got in at a ground level company, and I moved up to a backup project director. I'm used to a manual labor job or a fast food labor job. That's where my extent, because I wanted to choose to drink and use, and so to get into a better job was I'd have to quit drinking and using, and that was not going to be the deal when I was out there. But finding the 12-step program, it gave me a long enough stint of time that I got an office job today.
That's awesome.
It was something that I never believed would happen, but it was just another gift of the 12 steps. Go ahead.
That's some inspiring stuff, and you're super active in your sobriety.
Yeah.
And you make this deal look good, bro. Yeah. You attracted me. I was talking to you off camera to this program, and so what can you talk about some of those things that you're involved in right now?
So when I got my mentor, my mentor was involved in some 12-step program associated for a specific class of people, you could say young people, and then he got me involved right out the gate, and I got to go to this thing. It was a young people in 12-step program, or young people in 12-step conference, and what it was nuts, man. I got to experience having loads of fun, being up 3 days on Red Bull. It wasn't that was not only the fun part, but it was just young people around my age, just having fun without drugs and alcohol. There was dances, there was games, there was great people that was talking. They had great talks about it. They all got sober young, and they all got just great things happen. I got to meet a lot of people, and I got to see a lot of people a lot of young people, and just a range of people, really, from all over the world. It wasn't just strictly in my area here in Oklahoma. It was just they were everywhere. They were coming from Texas, I think at that specific conference, it was 16 states, and then we had people from out of country, from Japan and from Ireland. I got to see that, recovery, anywhere I go, that I know that recovery is going to be there. This 12-step program has touched and affected many of people's lives, and I got to get involved in there's this thing in this 12-step program, it's service, and there's many ways you can be in service. But when I was at this conference, I was a marathon meeting co-chair. And what a marathon meeting is, it was a meeting that goes on every hour that's not during a main speaker hour. And I got to just be there and kind of get an overload, chairing meetings or making sure people are meeting there, and then and just basically just opening a meeting and closing a meeting. But I got to hear from all these people that came from all over these different states. They were they attended these meetings, and I got to hear their experiences and their way they recovered, and what they their specific ideas on certain steps. I got a different perspective. I gained a lot of knowledge at these conferences, and then the next year I got to chair that same position at the following conference the next year, and it was crazy. Some of the same people came back, and we knew each other, and we got to pick up with the same friends, and it's been that same thing everywhere I go. When I go to I've been out of state to these conferences, promoting our conference, had a great time. Got to see a lot of great places. Like I'm not rich by no means, but I got to go to like Nashville, Tennessee, and stay in a glorious hotel. Like teaming up with like other people from my state and like sharing rooms and stuff. And then I got to go to Chicago for an international conference. I've gotten to go to regional conferences. Like I got to see like that this is not only just me deal. Like this is a we deal.
Right.
Like we all like get to pick each other up, and we all get to like carry each other. And
less me, more we.
Yeah. It was less me, more we.
That's awesome, man. So yeah, that's what I'm finding out too. Like the bigger the fellowship grows in my recovery, and the more connections I have, the more growth I get.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears here. Like, what are some of the things that you focus on, or one or two things that you focus on not doing, and one thing or two things that you focus on doing throughout your week or day?
Okay, so a couple of the things that I focus on not doing is there's this thing they call getting into yourself, and what it is it's just me thinking about how I know something before I even get involved. Having content prior to investigation is a way to say it. Like, right. So I don't try to judge anything of like a spiritual or like, criticism even. Like, I don't try to judge it right out the gate. Like that person doesn't know what they're talking about. Like sometimes I'm at work and like, I may have did some work, and then my boss or like, another employee comes up to me and they're like, hey, James, you messed this up, like, and this is how you messed it up. I don't instantly go to like, oh, that guy, and like, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just judging me. Like, it's kind of getting into self. Like,
right.
I don't do that. Like, I try to have an open mind and see things from the other person's point of view as well. Another thing I don't try to do is I don't try to draw out those old relationships, like not like romantic relationships, but like old friendships. Like, I talk to those guys like sometimes, but like, it's really, I leave it up to the world. Like, I had to, not associate with the people that are doing what I used to do.
Right.